Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. I thought it'd be wise to take a look at 2014, make a few predictions. So let's start over here first. You know him, you love him, you read him in the Colorado Springs Gazette, the editorial editor, Wayne Laugesen. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jon.
And we found him. We looked. We went to every bar in Denver, every skeezy dive, and finally, at the last place, we found him at the Colorado Independent, Mike Littwin.
I remember I was picking up a man named Jon Caldara.
There was it. Yeah, that's a good place. Hey, welcome back to the world of electronic print. How goes it at the Independent?
It's going great. Getting readers by the day. My columns being picked up in newspapers around the state. It's like I'm almost back.
Almost.
Almost. And
almost
now,
back.
Now to be here with Caldara and my friend Wayne.
Now,
notice I just say, and my
friend Wayne.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we really missed you, by the way. I tell you, I just wasn't sleeping at night. Hey, let's talk. We were chatting off air, which was always fun. The changing dynamics of local voices. We're seeing it in talk radio, of course, that the corporatization is coming in, and it's getting squeezed and squeezed because the market isn't there. Listeners are dying off because they're older, and also younger people don't deal with commercials. Print.
Right.
I hate to tell you this, print's dying.
There've been rumors of that.
There've been rumors. People apparently
That's a
like
myth.
trees. Go figure.
No, that's not true.
But would you both agree with me that there's fewer and fewer, when I say local voices, I'm talking about local voices that have some sort of tenure. I think of the Vince Carrolls and the Pete Blakes and Lynn Bartles and guys like you and Susie Green, and no matter how you think of these people, they've got some history. They know the city, and I think we're losing some of them. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, they're expensive for one thing, and the economy's still terrible. It's still a hard business to be in. Any realm of the media right now is difficult
because everything's for free.
That's right. All kinds of new technologies have come in and devastated, old technologies that really were dependent on barriers to entry to make a lot of money and stay in business. So everything's sort of been disrupted right now.
And I miss the days. This is my old man. I remember when we had two newspapers in this town, and you guys would fight to scoop each other. And
Yes.
The Post and the News, on the news sides. I mean, I don't know about the business sides, but it was a real rivalry, and I think it was a professional rivalry. And the news just isn't as tight. There isn't as much exposure and accountability as there was when we had two newspapers.
When the Rocky Mountain News folded, there were approximately 410 people in the newsrooms of the two newspapers. Today, there's about 150 people at the Post. So you've gone down from 400 and some to 150, and that tells you a lot about what is covered and what isn't covered. I worry about, nationally, it's funny because what's happened nationally, if you want to read about Washington, which is the new sports,
Right.
There's so much more to read now than there ever was. There's Politico and Atlantic and
The Hill and all the rest.
the places that are there. But if you want to read locally, who's doing the watchdog of agencies? Nobody's doing that. The Post and the News used to have 5 people each down at the Capitol.
Especially in investigative journalism, where you're doing freedom of information requests and it takes time. I mean, now reporters, there's 150 people, they got to print out, they got to get their stuff out as quickly as possible, and they have to blog, and they have to tweet, and they have to put it on Facebook, and they have to do all this. So they're going faster.
We've
faster.
actually gone the other way at the Gazette. And as far as the death of print, what people are talking about there and what they don't really understand when they talk about that's the death of a particular distribution channel, that being the print product. Although amazingly, it has amazing staying power. A lot of advertisers still view it as the gold standard. A lot of people still like to subscribe to a print, even younger people like to have a newspaper in front of them in the morning. It's incredibly inefficient, but they still like it. But we have really invested in a lot more news gathering than I've been at the Gazette now for 6 years. And we are doing more Cora requests, open records requests. We are doing more investigative work than we've ever done, I think, in the history of the Gazette.
The Gazette
We've broken a lot of stories.
you guys are spending money, and you guys did it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the great story you guys just did?
Oh, we just did something on the Air Force Academy about this covert program.
Notice the guy who's still employed in the news industry is really bullish about it.
The Gazette is one of the few papers actually in the country that is raise the amount of money that they're spending. The Orange County Register is another one. Interestingly,
That's right.
no longer anywhere,
We
not related anymore.
We were cousins, and
but
now we're not.
but there are a few papers that the Gazette one. It'd be very interesting to see what happens. That is spending money on the print product.
Well, there are some investors out there. You've got Jeff Bezos, you have Warren Buffett, you have others who are investing heavily in the news product, and they don't think so much in terms of print or internet or whatever. They are in the information business, and however it gets distributed is fine. What they're investing in long term is information, and then if you are the ones who have the credibility and the ability to dig and to tell stories that are not being told and no one else knows how to tell, that ultimately there's profit to be made in that.
We'll see.
We'll
see if there is.
Yeah.
We're rooting for it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're doing well.
Yeah, a year from now, you'll be joining him over at some internet paper going, oh, this is a great deal, I tell you.
Internet papers are great.
I tell you,
it's about the information, not the distribution channel.
Littwin, who? All right, let's get to next year. I think 2013.
One of my favorite years already.
Yeah, because you're getting a paycheck.
Exactly.
That's a good deal. 2013 was one of the most fascinating political years in Colorado history. We're all junkies, all right? And no matter where you lie on the political spectrum or off the political spectrum as you are, then this was a great year. I mean, but what does it set up for next year? Particularly, let's talk first about the governor's race, because a year ago, if you told me that Hickenlooper might be vulnerable or growing to be vulnerable, I would have laughed at you. There's just no way. But here we are. I believe that the governor is now, if not vulnerable, very close to being vulnerable. He has one thing on his side, which is he's going to be running against a Republican, and so we're going to shoot each other in the foot again. So let's start with the governor's office. What do you see in the race coming up?
Well, can I?
Yeah.
We really have to start with the legislature, because the legislature is going to have a huge impact on the governor's race. And what's going to happen in the legislature is two things. This is going to be the setup for what happens in the governor's race and what happens in the race for the legislature. The Republicans are going to do what they're going to copy what the Republicans in Congress have done. That they're going to substitute guns for Obamacare. So they're going to repeal. Like every day they're going to come up with a new repeal bill. And they're going to try to keep guns out in front of the public as much as they possibly can. These were the guys that grabbed your guns, and they're going to say that every day that they can in the legislature. The Dems are going to send them all to kill committees, and nothing's going to get passed. But every day they're going to be press conferences out in front on the west steps of the Capitol saying, we're trying to salvage, what we can, what this governor has done to you. That's what the Republicans do. The Democrats, on the other hand, who had this, wild and crazy session last year, they're going to do nothing.
They're going to do nothing.
They're going to
do a whole lot of nothing.
Nothing. They're not going to. They're going to pass, apple pie stuff. They're going to look at jobs.
But that's always election year. Legislators always have.
But this is. This is going to. But
except on fracking, I believe there's going to be some real movement in the legislature.
Right.
And this is going to be the dance that the gov's going to have to do. Is people, after the 4 fracking bans pop through, there's going to be something in the legislature.
Well, we just spoke with Senate President Morgan Carroll yesterday or the day before, I believe, and we being the Gazette's editorial board, and we asked her, would you support a referendum to the ballot that would change the Constitution to empower city and county governments to heavily regulate fracking? And she said, I would support such a thing, and she expects such a thing to go forward. So I think we're going to see some real movement to attack fracking, and I think that the Democrats feel pretty comfortable in that, even though it's sort of a right-left issue to an extent, the right being more fracking friendly, the left not so much. It's also a NIMBY issue. And anytime you can put a NIMBY issue out there, that becomes less bipartisan. And I think we're going to...
Here's my take on this. I think that's going to happen. We're going to see that in the legislature. I don't know if it's going to be enough, but the guy in the hot seat, again, is going to be the governor. He's a geologist. He knows the truth about fracking. He's comfortable with fracking. He drinks fracked water. It's going to be part of the new brew in his next brewery.
Got some right.
Yeah. So if he doesn't sign something, then the left is going to be angry at him. But then there'll be a citizens initiative, and he'll be asked, how does he feel about that? And so that's going to become a campaign issue for him.
Yeah,
gonna
but
be a
he
tough
can.
one.
I don't. It is a tough issue personally, but I don't think it's that bad for him politically. It's going to be good for him to pull back from the liberals. It's not going to cost him any liberal votes. Liberals, believe me, are not going to be voting for Tom Tancredo as an example. So, he doesn't have to worry that much about the liberal vote. He's solidified the liberal vote with the gun bills. If he pulls back on fracking, that's all. All he wants to do is win back that center business vote. That's the people he. No, but what you're not going to see though is the state suing anybody during this gubernatorial race.
But they're already suing Longmont, aren't they? Already suing Longmont?
Yeah, but I bet it doesn't go to any courtroom ever. Is my guess. You're not going to see anybody. You're not going to see Hickenlooper pushing against the people who vote for him.
Then guys like me are going to say, wait a second, that's your job.
Who
Your
cares
job.
what you say?
Boy, ain't that the truth. Let's switch on to the other side.
Yeah.
The Republicans have been remarkable this year. And as a guy who rips on Republicans all the time, this was one of the years where they stood together, not only on guns, and I think got a huge bounce off of that, but they stood together on taxes. And when there's an educational tax like 66, there's always 5 Republicans go, oh, kids, and they didn't. They stay, and they're getting the benefit of that. Not a single elected Republican did that. Now it's primary time. What was it, in 06? Democrats put up one pro-life Catholic, Ritter, and no challenger. How does that happen? 4 years later, one business-friendly, they thought, a candidate for governor. And my team, we get into a circular firing squad.
I'll tell you how it happens. The Democrats are less devoted to ideology than the Republicans are. They want to win. And if someone has a D by their name, they'll support that person. And they know how to win. Democrats are far superior to Republicans when it comes to political maneuvering, political strategy. Where they fall down...
As demonstrated by the last decade in Colorado.
That's right. And where they fall short and what's going to lead to a political revolution likely going into 2015, statewide and nationally, is that Republicans fare better on policy. Their policies work better. The Democrats have put forth policies that are now in play and are failing by the standards of the people that these policies were written to serve. They don't like them. They don't like Obamacare. They don't like the proposal for $1 billion tax increase. We saw what happened on the gun bills. We saw 2 recalls and 1 almost recall that resulted in a resignation.
Same thing.
So yeah. So just as bad as Republicans are at politics, you could say the same thing about Democrats as far as
But they did get them passed. I believe this last year, in 13, was really a high watermark for the left here in Colorado. And they were able to pass lots of things that they wanted to get passed.
to their demise.
Perhaps to their demise. We're going to find out this year.
I would say not to their demise. So, I mean, my guess is that it won't be. And
why?
Well, part of the reason is we're talking about the Republican primaries. Republicans have a long but extremely weak bench right now. It's really stunning how bad their bench is. And if you look at
they don't have a bench. They actually have a folding chair.
Yeah. So if you look, Tom Tancredo to me cannot be elected to a statewide office. He's too controversial. He said too many crazy things. He has got too many people who dislike him. He's not going to be elected to a statewide office. I think there's a very good chance he'll be nominated, though. If he's not nominated, Scott Gessler has the next best chance of being nominated. Scott Gessler has made his office, in which people like to think of as a nonpartisan office, into the most partisan Secretary of State that I can remember in this state. And he's made a lot of people dislike him.
But let me challenge that. Let me challenge that one part.
Yeah.
I understand Tom was probably in the lead position to get the nomination, and he's going to have a tough time winning in general. People in the know, people who are junkies like I, follow what goes on in the Secretary of State's office, and he's been the target of Ethics Watch, and we know how a lot of this works. Some things stick, some things don't stick. But does that really translate out to a general, uninformed electorate who doesn't follow things the way we junkies do?
No. His name is in headlines a lot, which he likes, but it's been a lot negatively. He doesn't, he likes to go out there and stick it into people. He he's been very controversial and very in your face. And if you look at people who were elected governor in Colorado, you find very, very few of those people. We elect people who appear to be moderate. Whether they're moderate politically doesn't really matter as much as whether they appear to be moderate. And that's Bill Owens. That's Tancredo. That was even Ritter. I mean, Ritter got
Tancredo was moderate.
I'm sorry. I meant Hickenlooper.
Hickenlooper.
So I'm saying moderates, people who appear to be moderate, have that moderate sensibility. That's who wins in Colorado.
Democrats are better at portraying themselves in moderates than are Colorado Republicans. I think you're right about Tancredo. I think he has a very solid, large, dedicated following, but the problem is it's not quite large enough. And it doesn't go beyond that large, dedicated following. So when you talk about Scott Gessler, I mean, the other side's going to have plenty of ammunition to use against him, and they'll spend a lot of money putting ethics complaints up on the TV screen. You could see somebody without name recognition, if this person, say Mike Kopp, performs well in the caucuses and the primaries, you could see someone emerge who is an actually good candidate, who actually can come across as somewhat moderate and
because
likable.
He doesn't have a history.
Right, he doesn't have a lot of a history, but what history he does have is pretty good.
Right, he's been a great state legislator. Yeah. He was widowed. He left the legislature, and he's very palatable. So yes. I could see that. And
I think Mike is. Yeah, I like Mike, but he's got very little name recognition.
That's right.
And whether he'll be able to raise money, I'm not sure where to come from.
If he can overcome the name recognition and the money, the fact that you like him says everything, because he is likable, and that measures higher than almost anything in politics.
God, would you actually want Littwin's endorsement? I mean, if I were running, I would pay to avoid that.
I like Brophy too, for that matter.
Actually, let's look at it. Brophy's another likable, terrific candidate. I mean, and I'm
telling you, you're not going to win if guns is your major issue. You're not going to become governor of Colorado on guns. As much as Democrats have fared badly on guns, and of course they have, that you're not. If Republicans thought that guns were a great winning issue statewide, they put them on the ballot. They're not going to put them on the ballot.
No, it's
they
jobs
lose.
in the economy.
They lose on the ballot.
But what somebody like Brophy gives is that war on rural Colorado, the voice of
rural Colorado is rural Colorado. More than one half of the population in Colorado lives in Denver. Lives in greater Denver. You're not going to win because rural Colorado votes for you.
Well, let's do this thought experiment for a second. Let's assume there was only one candidate for a Republican, and it was the right candidate. It was a Hank Brown. Somebody like that. Would he win
this year?
Yeah,
I think so. I think the Democrats are in that much trouble. Everyone's tied to Obamacare right now. You look at Hickenlooper's problems right now. Like you said, who would have thought he'd have this sort of a low approval rating at this juncture? It's amazing.
Was it the New York Times who said, out of any Politico who hasn't had a scandal, this guy's taken the most hits this year of any Politico?
I believe it was the Times. He's tied to the recall. He's tied to Amendment 66. He's tied to Obamacare. He's tied to guns. All of these things
he's
are. He's
tied to Dunlap as well.
Yeah, that's right.
That non-decision is going to echo his leadership style.
He's made a lot of mistakes.
Let me ask you a question. Advertising fodder for the right.
Let's assume the electable Republican was running, and let's say it was something like Hank. And trust me, Hank's not going to run. He's told me as much as I beg him. Yeah. But would somebody like that, let's say Hank Brown, former senator, if he ran, would he win, do you think?
Well, it's a good question. And, if you look at the governor's race, which Democrats have dominated for the last 30 years, except for the 8 years that Owens was in there, and it was not a Democratic state during that time. So it would suggest that the candidate is more important than the party, particularly in the.
Well, that was then. Things have changed.
Yeah, well, Democrats definitely ahead. If you've got an equal or better candidate right now, Democrats are going to win. But the question is Hickenlooper vulnerable?
Yeah, is he?
Yeah, he's vulnerable. He'd be vulnerable to the right. I'm saying he made a mistake on Amendment 66. You can't support a bill. I mean, and I think it loses 2-1. You can't. He made his mistake on guns. he should have let the legislature pass a couple of really dumb things that he could have vetoed. Right. So then he could have just put it on the legislature. Say, look, I kept the sane bills. They tried to pass these crazy bills, which I vetoed. Then he could have said, I'm standing up to the crazies in my party. I'm not letting them hurt Colorado. So instead, he signed every one they passed. That was since Morse got recalled anyway, they could have passed that crazy liability bill, right? Which now had no chance of ever.
And then he vetoes it. You're right. Instead he ran all this behind-the-scenes interference, which I know is a fact, to stop this stuff from coming onto his desk. He didn't want to be embarrassed. But Mike's absolutely right. Why not let it come onto your desk and then veto it? But I mean, he does have, and I want to say on the fracking thing, I do think that hurts him to an extent because I think it hurts him with his base. They're a lot less enthused about him than they probably should be because of that issue.
I agree with that, but we get to an election. When it gets to election, everything changes.
Yeah, but you also, particularly the Democratic machinery, depends on foot soldiers, and the eco-left is one of the most powerful next to the teachers.
Look, Romney didn't make it because he didn't have the support of his base. He didn't have the enthusiasm of his base. So you could see the same dynamic playing out in this one.
All right, but if I'm hearing you, Hick is vulnerable. The weak part of this is that the Republicans won't have their act together. Are we in agreement that that's the ace up?
Yeah, the thing that hurts Republicans, the thing that has hurt Republicans in Colorado has been social issues. And interestingly, the Republicans are going to try very hard to stay away from social issues. But if you look around the country, in almost every place where there is a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, you've seen these social issues come to the fore. I mean, there are abortion laws being passed all over the country, and the Democrats, believe me, they will make this once again the issue which they run on. They'll run on what happened in Texas and what happened in Alabama and what happened in Tennessee.
They tried to do that in the recall. It didn't work. They tried. A lot of money was spent trying to cast these guys as radical, anti.
And by the way,
anti-abortion,
for the Republicans, a couple of the big ones are gone. Pot's legal, gay marriages or civil unions, whatever you want to call it, that's legal. You can whine about it. It's done. And for Republicans, that's a favor. Hey, we've only got about
that's smart for them. They should have done that earlier.
They should have. They should have done that earlier. All right, let's switch gears to the U.S. Senate race because this is going to be a huge one, and I see the same dynamic already happening. I think it's really hard to defeat anybody named Udall if they live west of the Mississippi. I think that's an uphill climb, but now we're going to see the same Republican dynamics this time around. Amy Stevens, Ken Buck, Owen Hill, and Baumgartner.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Mustache.
I think
if I hear one joke from you about Baumgartner's mustache,
I love his
listen,
mustache.
Furball.
I love his mustache.
With apologies to Owen Hill, I think this is an Amy Stevens, Ken Buck race right now. Yeah. And who would have ever thought? This goes to the power of how badly Obamacare is hurting the Democrats. Who would have thought that Udall could even be in the universe of vulnerability at this point? I would never have thought so. Well, the polls say he is, and that's shocking to me. He has slipped so far in the polls for doing nothing on his part except the fact that he's a Democrat and he's tied in with Obamacare and he supported Obamacare. He's the most moderate Democrat.
He whispered the lie you're not supposed to whisper. The video of him saying, "And you can keep your plan if you like."
That was not a lie on Udall's part. You could argue about Obama. That Udall may have been mistaken, but that was not a lie.
Did anybody who looked at this bill, even I know it's 1,000, who could say that? There was no way you could keep your coverage if you wanted to.
I wouldn't say that was a lie on Udall's part.
Well, then it means he's illiterate.
But let's look at though that matters, Mike.
But let's look at. I mean, if Udall loses, the Republicans will have swept the Senate. They will have control of every part of Washington except for the presidency and be in great shape to do that in 2016. I mean, the Democrats can't have Udall lose because if they do, I mean, they're done. This is a guy who is like 5-6 places up from the Republicans regaining control of the Senate. So it'll be very interesting. I mean, Democrats will have the money. And Republicans are
and
not going to have
a
strong
polished
candidates.
politician who's good at
His name is
Udall.
as you said, it's golden. It's golden here. I mean, I'd be very surprised if he lost. But if he lost, it means Democrats have to continue to sink. And who would have guessed how much they've sunk in the last year? They have to continue to sink on that kind of level for him to
I'd be
lose.
surprised if he lost, but at this point, for the first time, it's not out of the question. The
That's
guy even played his
absolutely
hand right on guns. I mean, he's a great politician.
He is. All right, if 2013, it was about guns and it was about citizen activists rising up in angry pockets. What's 2014? What is the issue that 2014 is going to revolve around? Do you think it's Obamacare?
It's Obamacare all the way, at all levels of government.
So, all levels of government, this is going to be a referendum on Obamacare.
I believe so, and I believe it's going to continue to get worse. And I'm not sure that most Democrats can overcome it.
Well, the issue is going to be the 2014 election, and whatever gets you to that. And I think you'll see Obamacare. If we don't know what Obamacare is going to look like a year from now, you're convinced that it'll be worse. I'm convinced it'll be probably better than it is now. The question is whether it'll be good enough. And we'll come down to the same fights that we come down to every election year. The question is, can Democrats make that magic work as they have for the last 10 years in Colorado? This will be a tougher year for them, but it was a tough year in 2010, and they pulled it off.
Well, 2010 was a tough year nationwide, but this was, their
Tough
machinery.
year in Colorado. They had a guy, a very weak candidate for Senate. And
Let me just say this. I think Republicans might finally start to be learning some lessons from the left. All right, we got to go.
not if Tom Tancred is nominated.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, listen for me on KHOW Radio. Check out the Independence Institute at independenceinstitute.org. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.